Okay, this is my review of the Glycine Airman 18. Sorry for the focus. Airman 18, Purist model, GL0223. Sorry, GL0223. And yeah, this is a very cool watch. And I'll go over why. I've had a few Glycines before, and actually two. They're both Airmans, but they're different models, and I'll try to maybe flash a shot of the ones I had. One of them was a Airman 42, and it's 42 millimeters. It's a more modern design. It had a blue gradient dial. Pretty much, you know, they all have dual crowns like this. The case shape was a little more modern. The bezel was different. It was all stainless steel. Nothing was painted in. It was also a Purist model, and by Purist that means the dial is the main hour and minute hands work in a 24-hour cycle instead of 12, which you typically get. So it's basically it's always 24 hours, and essentially the entire movement is essentially a GMT movement, and that's basically it. You don't have a fourth GMT hand that reads 24 hours like you do on some other models, like basically like watches sort of like the GMT Master from Rolex. You know, you have the main 12-hour hands, there's running seconds of course, and likely a date too, but there's a fourth hand that points to the 24-hour scale, and then you have a 24-hour bezel, which you can actually set as in combination. You know, it can get up to about 3 time zones. Anyways, I prefer this model because I don't have a 24-hour movement. You know, nothing that works in this operation, so it's something refreshing and different. It's just a different way of reading time. Like 6 o'clock a.m. will be with the hour hand pointing here, and 12 noon isn't necessarily 12 high, because it's actually 12 is afternoon is down here, and so forth. It's just a different way to read, but it's not that hard. If you're not used to 24 hours GMT time, you know, military time, it's pretty simple. Anything past 12 is nighttime or going into the PM. Anything from basically midnight or 1 all the way back to 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. No, sorry, it's 12 p.m. That's 12 a.m. actually up here. That's a.m. And if you're not accustomed to reading that time, trying to figure out, okay, what is that in actual 12-hour terms? Like for instance, right here, it's going to be almost, it's about 4 minutes till 11 o'clock, because you see the hour hand, that's actually almost at the 23. So that basically means that'll be 11 p.m. soon. And if you want it too short, you see there's an extra long tail end to the hour hands. That points neatly over across to this side, and it corresponds with, you know, what we would normally read in 12-hour terms. So it's over here, and you got the back end pointing here. That basically means it's 11 p.m. and so forth. If it was pointing at the 18, the back end would be pointing at the 6, and so forth. So it's actually quite easy to read this dial very easily. And the other model that I had just before this one was the DC4. I don't have the exact reference for that, but I think it's GL068, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll try to flash a picture of it right now. And that one is kind of close to this, but it is actually also a 42 millimeter case, which is wearable for me. But most Glycines, regardless of the case size, the thickness is actually surprisingly relatively thin. It's usually, like this one is a little over 10 millimeters. And I don't think even the 42 millimeter size I don't think it even passes 11 millimeters. If it does, just barely, but relatively thin for an automatic movement, and it uses a Swiss, I think, ETA. I always forget if they. Some of the movements use Solitas, and some of them, I've been told, use ETA. There are other reviews on this that get more technical about it, but you know, these are essentially the same movements, ETA and ETA movement. I wish I knew which one it was, but I guess it's one that's modified to run in 24 hours as well. Regardless, this dimension for the 18 is quite perfect, I think. 39 millimeters across. Lug to lug, I think it's like 48 or something. I have to measure it, but it's not quite that long. You see the angle down very nicely, and that's the one thing that's good about the Airman series, and even the combat subs, and perhaps some of the other Glycine models, but at least those are the two main ones I think most people know about, and they just hug the wrist so nicely, and it's so thin. It's great. So what is it that I like about this as well is this the design. This is pretty close to the original Airman that came out in the 50s, which actually is a GMT watch that predates the Rolex GMT Master. So yeah, that's got it's not as famous as that watch because, you know, Rolex, but it should give credit where credit is due. And this was a GMT watch automatic one of the first ones that ever was produced and came out to the market. And so this is very faithful to that. If you want one that's even closer and that's still built today, you look for the Airman number 1. And it comes in 36 and a 40. I always thought it was just a 36, but it does come in a 40. Saw it on Mass Drop, which is where I got this one too. They usually have the best prices for new Glycines. Roughly $600 plus shipping. You have to pay that and maybe tax if it's in a particular state that these might be sold out of, I think. But yeah, the Airman 1 is very close, slightly different lugs, a little bit more straight and old school, even a little bit thinner. The crowns are smaller. The 24-hour bezel, the numbers, the way they're engraved, it's smaller. And it has the old logo, which just says Glycine without the, I guess that would be, what is that, a crown? Or is it the top of a castle? Forget. I guess it's a crown. And that's basically it. It's a little bit more simpler. The dial is practically the same. It has a roulette. Is it roulette? Or maybe the dates are actually all red. It doesn't alternate between red and black. And that's basically it. But I wanted one of those because it's like it looks more true to the very original ones. But in retrospect, I'm glad I didn't get it. I actually don't like the smaller crowns. I think they're a little too small. And it's possible, I think on those models, this can actually be unscrewed all the way, and you might actually lose the top of this. It might actually fall out, but this doesn't. You can screw it all the way, and it'll stop. And that's to lock down the bezel or unlock it, as this was. But I'll show you that in a moment. And the other reason why it kind of deterred me from going with that ultimately was the water resistance only like 30 meters. As opposed to this one is 200 meters, which is great. This basically could be a dive watch. And again, the DC4 I owned and the other Airman that's a little bit more modern, has a different handset and everything. It was this 42 I can wear, but I prefer this. This is a nice compact small size for my just under 7-inch wrists, and I'll probably do a wrist shot later. What else can I say? Let's just go over some of the features. This movement has hacking and hand winding. You just unscrew this, right, and go. It is, most Glycines pretty much have the smoothest hand winding action I've ever had. You can barely hear it. It's just so smooth. It's really nice. And this particular model is very, very good at its accuracy. I've been getting basically +2, maybe +4 seconds a day at most, and it holds pretty well. I'll show you the hacking feature. Okay, because I actually had it on the first position. The first position will just change the date, not a big deal, but let's go over this real quickly. Since I was talking about the date, you'll notice here, let me get this in focus. What's cool about this, you see how the window is kind of like at an angle, it kind of radiates, it opens wider on this side. And you notice it's not just your ordinary day wheel that you just slap in there, which will probably be straight, but you can see the shape of the numbers actually get larger as it goes out to fill in the window. So that's a nice custom feature. It's not just another edit movement that's just, in a different case and all that, but no, it's definitely something special about that, besides the 24-hour, movement. But yeah, so that's a nice attention to detail. And as I advance the time, what's nice about this particular one, at least my example, watch how the date wheel, just before midnight, but it's close enough, snaps right into the next day. I like that. It's not like Seiko, where they kind of have a nice, not nice, but it's okay, but slow turnover of the date, and it might start up a little bit before and then end sometime afterwards, and then they'll finally turn over, which is okay, but this is nicer and cleaner because it just snaps to it. And then when you're ready to set it, push it down and let it go. So I'm going to lock this back down. It usually goes in pretty smoothly. It's got good grip, and that's why I like this model, because for this size, I like how chunky these knobs are. These crowns are really good to grip, and it looks kind of neat with the chunky crowns like this on this particular size body. It looks good. And as I mentioned in some groups, as I posted this pics of this before, it's very reminiscent of the CK2926, or is it 2629? It's the Lume style Omega Seamaster pilot watch that you've seen in, if you've ever watched Dunkirk, that's probably the most recent movie that's featured that Omega. Tom Hardy's wearing it when he's flying the Spitfire. Very cool watch. It's very similar in design. It doesn't have a 24-hour readout, and the bezel, of course, has a timer, but the crowns are very similar. It has this similar kind of chunkiness and the lockdown for the rotating bezel, which is bidirectional timing bezel on those Omegas. And I believe Longines and JLC also made a version of that as well during World War II. So that's what's kind of neat about it. It's very classic, actually, very classic pilot's watch. This design is still very unique to Glycine itself. I mean, there's no homages that make anything really like this, and you know your watches, and you spot it, it's a Glycine. You don't think it could be a Submariner, or it could be a Daytona or Speedmaster kind of homage thing. Nope, this is almost always a genuine Glycine. And so you unlock this crown, the second crown here, until it stops, or you don't have to go all the way, but enough to just loosen the grip of this piece on the bezel. And this is a proper GMT bezel, because it actually is bidirectional, which a lot of companies, the micro brands, especially when they make a version of a watch that probably was a dive watch at first, and they made a GMT version of it, they always use a unidirectional bezel, which it works, but it's not ideal because you can't just freely, go to the time zone you want. You actually have to do maybe a pretty full circle if it's just even a little bit off behind where it needs to be. So, and what's nice about this too is clicks. If there's any play this is negligible, it's actually holding quite well, but it just snaps. You can hear it just snaps. Sorry about the focus. Just snaps right into place really good. And when you need it lock it down. And you can see how it steps every half hour. So you can do those weird time zones that might fall on a 1.5 hours or whatever the hell it is that isn't exactly on the hour or hours of a time zone. I think India or some places do have a weird, unusual time differential, and so you can tune it to that, and there's a proper 48 clicks. It's not a 60 or even a 120, which a lot of those unidirectional bezels that have a GMT function, they've been converted from a dive watch. They keep that. I don't understand why they don't just put in the effort to just make it a bidirectional bezel. Is it that hard? You mean you just have to adjust the geometry of the spring so it can turn both ways, but the way unidirectional bezels are, they have that kind of spring clip thing that's in a particular angle. That's why you can flip it over, but when you try to push it back, it gets locked. I just think they just have to change that piece so that it's not like in one direction. You can, maybe it's in the middle or something, so you can just click over it in the other direction. Seems like a simple fix, but they failed to do that. And what else is there? There's a display back here, which most of the Airmans usually have, and this little plain motif right there on the rotor, Glycine Airman, and it's a nice movement. Again, this has been very accurate. Swiss made, of course. Does it say the model number in here? I think it's an SW. Salida. I think it might be, because I believe it was like, I think it's an ETA, but then I heard someone else that said it was a Salida, but it doesn't matter. It's all basically the same. Anyways, give you a quick wrist shot. Second here. This is not the original strap. This is a strap by Haveston. They make really nice watch accessories, and mostly NATO style, but they have some others, and they've been expanding. And this is one of my original ones. Well, actually, this is a new version. That's a single pass. It doesn't have the typical double pass that you get on some NATOs. They have like this extra piece that goes over, and then there's like a metal ring here that has a loop through, and you don't need that. This NATO system is already redundant, and this is overkill, and it makes it a little thicker. This is only one layer, and the watch is already thin, so it just sits really well on this particular style strap. You can see it curves down good. Again, on my just under 7-inch wrist, it works quite nicely. And my friend has a similar model, but the blue one, and he has a 6.5-inch wrist, and he really loves this size, and it works well for him too. So yeah, you see just how sleek this profile is. I mean, how flat it is to the wrist. It's good. It's really good. Let's lock this down. And what I also like about this is, let me get this picture here. I got this off the internet, but basically this is a picture from Vietnam, American pilot from Vietnam. You can see there's an F4 Phantom back there, and he's probably in one, and look what's on his wrist. A Glycine Airman. This is probably the original one. There's no doubt that's an Airman with all the readouts of the 24-hour scale, and the pointer hand there, and the shape of the lugs and everything. It's one of the original ones. I'm guessing that must be a 36mm watch. Because 40, I would think it would still wear a little bit bigger or wider on the wrist, so I like that. I like that it has that history. Like, this was a favorite watch of the American forces. and in the postal exchange or PX, they'd order these watches and of their choice, and many of them prefer to get the glycine. I know the Seiko turtles are very, the 6105s, I forget the reference, but you know, the Seiko turtles are another famous Vietnam era watch, but this one is also one for pilots in particular. I doubt that they use this on the ground as much, but I could be wrong. But I imagine it's Airman and everything is mainly for this. And that's right, thumbs up, because you got a glycine. So I like that. You know, I'm always interested in military history and gear and stuff. And the fact that this watch has that lineage. It's not the direct model of this, but it's pretty darn close, but a modern variation of it. 200 meters water resistant and so forth, probably slightly better build and everything, and I imagine improved movement since the 50s. Yeah, this is quite cool, and I think 39 inches is quite the perfect size for anyone, and you can't argue the 10 millimeters or so thickness is also uncommon for a lot of the automatics out there. Even the simplest movements, they tend to make them a little bit thicker than I feel they need to be. Seiko, you listening? I love Seikos, but they do tend to be just a hair or two thicker than you really, they seem like they would need to be, I don't know why. They should just reduce it. Anyways, straight end links. Okay, not. This is going to be sold, but I told him this is a used watch and took a little poly Cape Cod that would clear that up. Can't complain. And I say the way you would normally use this watch is, I can tell the time is use this as your local time, and all you need to do is when you're in another country, another time zone, say it's just 18 hours ahead, you stick it like that, and then you lock it down and you're set. So now it may be 4 a.m. on our time, but where you're at now, it's actually that will actually be 10 o'clock, around 10 o'clock, right? So that's how that works. And I think that's, if you're okay with that, having the way the main orientation is your local time, which may be in another country because you're actually in another country. Your local time is not actually necessarily local anymore. That's your home time rather. Then that would read that, and you just have to adjust the bezel to your local time zone, which I think is quicker than. And it's pretty easy to read. Just go to 22. That should be 10. If it was the hour hand was pointing down here, obviously it's 4 a.m. and so forth. So. Not much else to say about that. So let's, I'm going to reset this back to 0. And let's lock this down. And it fits nicely in the teeth perfectly. It won't budge. It's actually got a pretty good clicking system. It's firm, and I don't think you're likely to bump it anyways, but you have that extra security. Yeah. And I was just going to say about this. This is not the original strap of this watch. It's back here. It came with, you can get these in a couple combinations. I think they have one with a croc style, which I think is kind of weird. That's a little bit too dressy for this. I wouldn't necessarily use this as a dress watch. That bezel mainly is what makes it a bit more too tooly. But yeah, this is kind of basically what it looks like. Haven't really got a chance to wear it much, so it's pretty new. Genuine leather, but it's just a great fit. If you get like something like the vintage Airman Airman number ones, which is more vintage style, they will give you thinner, non-contrast stitching leather straps or something, and they look alright. They look a period for that. What that number one is supposed to represent, like a watch from the 50s or 60s. which they probably generally have it on a thinner leather strap, not something as heavy duty as this. It's a little bit more modern, but I think this works great. Obviously, this is a strap monster. It works great on any NATOs. You get a pilot's watch, strap with the rivets, something in brown or even khaki or tan leather that look great with this. It's pretty universally versatile dial, being matte black, and it's just a nice finish. You know, mostly brushed, but you also have a lot of polish on the sides, which give it some accent. And I guess that's about it. I thought there was more I wanted to say. Sorry, I just got into a car accident today, or somebody rear-ended me, so I'm a little bit frazzled. But I just wanted to get this out because this watch just got sold, and I got to pack it up before I do. Anything else? The Lume shot here. The Lume is alright. It's not the best, to be honest. It could be better. The handset, even the second hand, the little pip on that, is actually semi-decent. But let me see if I can turn off some of the lights here, so you might be able to. Let me see if I bump up the ISO. I can't. Can I slow down the shutter speed? There. Anyways, not the most impressive Lume. The hands are okay, but the indices are on the outside. And let me try this charges again. You know, noticeably weaker application, and this is not just this one, but I have two other Airmans before, and generally, to be honest, the Lume isn't the most impressive. The hands will last, but then because this is a 24-hour dial in particular, you got 24 indices that you have to try to reference in the dark, which is kind of tricky. If it was a 12-hour dial, you have enough space in between, you can have a better idea and can more clearly see what time it is, especially in the dark, when the hour indices fade out, but the hands still remain. You still could make it out if it was a 12-hour dial. You know, I've had swatches without any markings at all, and you know the hand positions. But on a GMT or 24-hour movement like this, so tight, it's going to be impossible to get a really good reference as to, you know, in the dark what time it is. It could be one or the other. So that is one little downfall. But for me, I like this model because I don't need I had the DC4 has a GMT hand, which has a fourth hand, and you can technically, you could set 3 time zones, but I barely even need myself 2 time zones. I don't travel that much, if at all, these days, and yeah, there's rarely any need for track more than another country. I don't need to know 3. And as one of my friends said, if you're going to track more than 2 time zones, you probably should just get a world timer and be able to track everything. Why just limit yourself to 3? You know, why not just be able to see any time in the world at any given glance, pretty much, on a world timer? Yeah, if that's important. But for me, yeah, just having 2 time zones is good enough. I think some people are too obsessed with, oh, I don't have a GMT movement or watch, you know, that has that fourth hand. And it's like, okay, but do you travel, or do you really need it? Probably not. I don't know. That's why I'm thinking. For me, I think that way, and I think they're missing the point of this dial, this configuration with the Purist, is that you really don't, you know, unless you really need the 3rd time zone. This is a GMT watch. It's a very unique way of representing it. I mean, because the whole dial is 24 hours, so it's absolutely 24 a GMT time completely on the dial, not just a hand that points to a direction. And I like this because there's no ambiguity as to what time is it. I mean, if you had the 12-hour hand and you're trying to figure out, you know, if it, you know, looking at it as 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., you don't know. Especially if the double 12s where they have the 12-hour bezel. I don't like those. They're a little bit cleaner looking because they don't have as much numbers, but that's adds to the ambiguity of reading the time, because is it from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. or is it from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m.? You know, you don't know where in another country it is. Is it daytime or nighttime? And with this, you can always know when it is. And so I like that. I don't make it a habit of knowing, being that familiar with another country or time zone to know, oh, it's actually AM or PM at this time, and I know I shouldn't bug somebody, or I know that a particular store or something is closed perhaps that I might want to contact. Yeah, at least with the 24-hour like a layout like this, you can instantly know if it's too late or too early or just right time to contact somebody. But with the 12 or just a 12-hour bezel, you know, as you're a math whiz and really familiar, yeah, I can't think of, it wouldn't be as intuitive to figure out, okay, the GMT hand, or the 12-hour hand, I guess it doesn't have GMT, the 12-hour hand is pointing at this, but it's like advanced to 10, is it 10 p.m. or 10 a.m.? I don't know. Anyways, this is much better and straightforward way of reading time. And this got a little bit long, as it usually does. I'm going to try to work on my format, but oh man, so busy. Got a main job, got a second job, and technically this is a third job. And you count that I have 2 kids, that's another 1 or 2 jobs. And I have a dog. So yeah, time is not on my side, unfortunately. So I have to squeeze in what I can and the best that I can. And a lot of the stuff is unscripted. I just go with the flow, and if I ramble, but I want to just at least give my opinion and why I think this watch or any other ones is good or bad. But I rarely have any bad watches that I keep that are worth mentioning. You know, I don't usually like to talk shit about watches anyways. I was just trying to keep it positive. But if it moves me enough, or in a bad way, then I will talk shit about it and give my honest opinion about a particular watch. But I rarely pick up anything I don't like that much. And if I do, I almost instantly will have probably sold it or otherwise returned it or out of my possessions before I have a chance to review it or let people know what I think about it. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. If I miss anything, I guess I'll have to add it in later. But otherwise, peace out. And